Through many years of baking with almond flour, I have perfected easy tips for making light, fluffy cakes, and this moist almond flour lemon cake is no exception. It's simple enough for even a novice baker to pull off. Hi, I'm Melissa Erdelak from the gluten-free website Mama Gourmand, and today we are going to make an almond flour lemon cake. I like working with almond flour as a gluten-free flour alternative because it's consistent. It's not like gluten-free flour where there's lots of different starches and you never know between brands how it's going to turn out. Almond flour is almond flour, but it also has some drawbacks. It has a tendency to be very dense and very heavy and can have a compressed texture, especially in baked goods. So today I'm going to teach you 2 easy tricks with how to make an almond flour cake that is still fluffy and moist. One of it is an ingredient everyone should have in their pantry, and the other way is just how we incorporate the eggs. So let's make your gluten-free life a success and not a hot mess. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna separate the egg whites from the egg yolks and beat them separately. When you're separating egg whites and yolks, they should both be at room temperature, but I recommend separating them when they're cold. So have your cold eggs, separate them, and then let them sit out so they're room temp. Room temp eggs beat a lot fluffier and stiffer if they're at room temp. So we have 3 egg whites. And first I'm just going to mix that until it's foamy, and then we'll gradually start adding the sugar to that. Once the egg whites are foamy, I'm gonna gradually add some sugar, about 2 tablespoons at a time, until it gets to like a meringue texture. I'll show you what that's like if you're not familiar with meringue. So now we have our meringue. It should be very stiff. So it should hold its form when it's lifted up. And the reason why we do this is because it builds structure in the cake. The cake will have a tendency to get very compressed, so the egg whites just makes it fluffier and builds up the structure of the cake. In your separate bowl, I have 2 KitchenAid mixing bowls, which I always find very helpful just for reasons like this. But if you don't, you could just transfer your egg whites to another bowl, clean it out, and use this bowl for your egg yolks. So we're gonna do the 3 egg yolks that came from the whites, and then another ½ a cup of sugar. And we're gonna beat that until it's pale and it doubles or triples in volume. And then that takes about 2 to 3 minutes. Okay, look at how different that looks. To this, we're gonna add our lemon flavor. So I have a tablespoon of lemon zest, a teaspoon of lemon extract, and then 4 tablespoons of melted and cooled butter. Every time I melt butter, it explodes in the microwave, so try to be a little more careful than me. And then we'll just combine that. Now we're going to add our dry ingredients to the cake. So almond flour. Almond flour can, when you are measuring it, it can be all different volumes. So if you just measure it, scoop it from the bag, it can be a lot more almond flour than say you're sifting it in or if you're weighing it. So I'm going to show you how I measure the almond flour for my cakes, but I also include the baking grams too. So if you want to be more precise about it, which I recommend, I would weigh your almond flour. You'll need 2 1/4 cups. So this is how I measure it. I just take it out of my bag, kind of fluff it up a little. And then level it off. Here's the other secret ingredient, cornstarch. I add cornstarch into almond flour recipes because it absorbs the oil from the almond flour, which almond flour is just ground nuts, so it has tons of oil in it. Now, if you go to the recipe post, which the link's below in the description box, I have a picture of what the cake looks like when it's baked with cornstarch and without. The taste doesn't change, so if you don't want to add cornstarch, you don't have to, or you could swap it out for coconut flour or arrowroot flour, but it will have a thinner texture to it. So I just like it. It just kind of makes everything a little bit more fluffy. So we need 1/4 cup of cornstarch, and then 1 1/2 teaspoons of baking powder, and then 1/4 teaspoon of salt. after you add the dry ingredients, the dough is going to be very thick, like cookie dough, and you are gonna have serious doubts about the recipe. You're gonna doubt that I know what I'm talking about, but you gotta trust. It is supposed to be thick at this point, but this is when we work in the egg whites and it becomes more like a cake batter. To work in the egg whites, I just do about 1/3 at a time. So I'm gonna add 1/3, mix it, and then add another 1/3, and then finally we're going to fold in by hand the last 1/3. I'm adding the last 1/3 of egg whites, and then this part I just mix by hand, just to, kind of like a souffle, like you want to be pretty delicate with the batter, just to incorporate as much air as possible to it. I scrape the side of the bowl and then just kind of work it in. Once all the egg whites are worked in, so you don't want to see any streak of egg whites, and you pour it into your prepared pan. I'm using a 9-inch round cake pan that's been greased and lined with parchment. Your other option is you can use an 8-inch pan if you want a thicker cake. It will just take a few minutes more to bake. And now for a little something special on the top, I put sliced almonds. So just sprinkle that all over. You can leave this off if you don't, but I like it. It's like a little crunchy, sugary texture. It's really good. And then over that, some coarse sugar. It's also called sanding sugar. And now we're ready to bake. It's going to bake for about 30 to 35 minutes. We have our beautiful almond flour lemon cake. It's come out of the pan, it's cooled. Now we're ready to put some bonus goodness on top. So I'm gonna make a quick lemon glaze for the top. For the lemon glaze, I just have a cup of powdered sugar and then 1.5 teaspoons of lemon juice. Now when you're making a glaze, it's not an exact science. Sometimes it's gonna be a little bit thicker than you want. Sometimes it'll be too thin. You can just adjust it by either adding a little bit more lemon juice or milk or powdered sugar. So see how this will drip thickly off the spoon? That's kind of what you're looking for. And then I'm gonna just take some on a spoon, drizzle it over the top. I have a piece of parchment paper or wax paper underneath just to catch any drips on your counter. So you have some options if you want to make different types of cake. You can put this in an 8x8 baking pan, or if you want to make a double layer cake, I would leave off the almonds, or you could put them on, the almonds and the sugar, double the recipe, and then you could do a cream cheese frosting or a buttercream frosting would be really great too. You can find the full printable recipe for the lemon cake and the glaze in the description box below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.